Greetings. Welcome everyone to the launch of We Will Not Cancel Us, a book in the Emergent series by Adrienne Maree Brown, and inspired by many other authors. And also here at Source Booksellers, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We have been so honored to be able to offer emergent strategy, pleasure activism, all of these fantastic books by Adrienne Maree Brown. And today we're going to be joined not just by Adrienne Maree Brown, but by Shira Hassan, who is a longtime harm reductionist and prison abolitionist, and also the former executive director of Young Women's Empowerment Project. And so she's also going to be joining us tonight. And Malkia Delvish Searle, an activist, a writer, a public speaker, someone that deals with digital rights, and the founding executive director of Media Justice, will also be with us tonight. So we are very excited. We hope everybody's rolling in. We're also live on YouTube. If you didn't get the link in your email and you maybe are frustrated with getting in, that's also another way to join us. And we're at 7:06, so we'll just wait a few more minutes and folks can keep rolling in while we begin. If you're joining us from outside of Detroit, we are Source Booksellers, a nonfiction bookstore in Midtown Detroit. We've been bookselling for 30 years, or 31, I guess, as of this year. And we're just so happy to host this event. So I will bring on Adrienne Maree Brown.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so grateful to Source Booksellers. I feel like y'all are my family home bookstore. So even though I couldn't come around the corner and be in the space with y'all, it's so beautiful to still get to have the first event of this book be with you. And just so folks know, Source Books is the bookstore of Detroit, one of the most beautiful, coziest little nooks where you can go and find everything. And you can order books from the Source no matter what, no matter where you are. I have people who are yeah, I only order emergent strategy from the Source, and they live in Cali. And I was like, okay, cool. I love it. So thanks to you all. Thanks to AK Press for organizing this. And yeah, thanks to everyone who has shown up for this conversation. I'm grateful. So my name is Adrienne. And I am here today as the author, We Will Not Cancel Us. And I also want to really uplift that this is also the book release week of a book called Undrowned by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. And last night we got to do the event for that. Tonight we're doing this. And I'm joined tonight by two very dear and long-term friends who were really crucial to the process of We Will Not Cancel Us coming into being. So I want to go ahead and bring on Shira and Malkia to be in the circle on the videos. Hi, beautiful people. And Shira and Malkia and I have known both of them separately for a very long time, like since I was a little baby organizer and baby facilitator and baby learner of all these things. And I've learned a ton from both of them. And just now we noticed that they've been in shared space, but this is the first time they're actually like meeting and speaking with each other. And which I also am laughing because when I was writing this piece, when this piece was like barreling through me, I just texted both of them as if they were good friends with each other as well. And I was like, y'all, I need you to like engage with me around this, like help. And I think there was one moment where one of you was like, who's the other person on the chat? And I was like, what? Obviously. Let's keep going. So it's a very Adrienne way of doing things, but I'm really glad that y'all could join tonight and really beyond words grateful for the ways that you showed up throughout the entire process of this so far. So first of all, I wanted to just ask everyone to drop in, land here. There's so much happening in the world right now. There's literally so many things happening this very second on the internet and in the world right now. So just to take a moment to land in your body, land in this moment, and scan your body a little bit without any sense of judgment. Just notice, observe the data of your body. How are you doing? How are you doing today? How is your pace? How is your spirit? How's your breath? How's your hydration? Throughout the time that we're going to spend together tonight, stay in touch with your body. You're always in your body. It's always there. You're always a nature body, but really attend to yourself. And if we were in real life right now together, we are in real life together. If we were in the same place together, I think that we would have brownies and some kind of hot cocoa that you could like choose to spike or not spike. In Detroit, it's a little chilly. And so we would be like cozy and wearing layers. And I just want us to sort of bring that awareness in. And I thought I would start out by reading a little bit of the book, introducing you into it. Oh, I just realized I should say on the internet, this is happening now and streaming on YouTube. This is really, yes, it really is. All right. So this is what the book looks like. We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice. It's 88 pages long, and it's fundamentally built around an essay called Unthinkable Thoughts in the Age of COVID-19. And the essay was written, I had gone away on sabbatical for 6 months, and I needed that sabbatical. Last year, I launched pleasure activism and also launched all these events for the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute and was facilitating and doing a bunch of other things. And I hit that line where I was like, I need to rest. I can't think straight. So I went away, I rested, and COVID came and everything changed. And then I returned. And within the first week or so of returning, I was really noticing a pattern of being invited to what felt like invited to dispose of people that some of them I knew, many of them I don't know, but being invited, being told like this person's bad and we should not deal with them. You should not deal with them. And we want to publicly see you not deal with them. And feeling like, this is interesting. Like I want to understand what this is about. And it felt like a huge uptick of that kind of request. And so I was like, what's going on? And started trying to pay attention to the pattern. And the more I looked, the more it felt like all these things are getting collapsed. And I think there's some hopelessness present. I think there's some cynicism present. And I think there's some longing for skills that we don't yet have present, and some longing for language that we don't yet have present. So I wrote a piece. I sent it to Shira. I sent it to Makia. I was like, what do y'all think? And they were like, this is long. And you're saying a lot. But it feels necessary. It feels like this is some stuff that needs to be said. I put it out into the world, and I got a huge wave of feedback that people were like, yes, thank you for saying this. Like, this is happening in our sector. I was only thinking in terms of movement, but I got a lot of feedback also from people beyond movement space who are like, this is happening over here in the theater world. This is happening over here too. That was the first wave. And then I got another wave of feedback from people who were like, you need to be really more careful. And what about survivors? And what about the difference between abuse and harm? And what about this? And what about that? And I learned so much from that second wave. And so the book, I hope, is a good representation of all of the learning. The original piece is in there, but edited a lot to reflect the learning. And then there's a piece on the learning. And then there's a piece on what is transformative justice, and the piece We Will Not Cancel Us, which is really a vision for abolition. And one of the first things in the book is a quote from Ruth Wilson Gilmore. And she says, abolition is about presence, not absence. It's about building life-affirming institutions. And so much of what I find myself longing for, and what drove the writing of this work, is that I'm longing for the presence of accountability, the presence of faith that we can hold each other and that we can handle moving through our differences with each other, and the presence of so many of us in a compelling and accountable relationship with each other that it makes it no longer appealing for people to engage with the absence technologies of policing, the absence technologies of prisons, the absence technology of cancellation. And I really honor the cancellation and call out culture has a history of really being powerful when used well against those who we have no other way to reach because of the power differential. And a lot of what I really am speaking to in this book is, what do we do when that's not the power differential? What do we do when the power differential is more horizontal? What do we do when it's people in our own community? How do we take responsibility for each other's healing and for breaking these cycles of harm? So I'll read a few little things here. One is from the intro. With each of the pieces in this collection, my goal is to bring transformative justice to life within our movement spaces, not as a futurist theory we are demanding from the larger world, but as a practice we are rigorously in with each other as believers, growing the capacity to invite others into. I honor all our different attempts at learning to do justice ourselves. I respect and learn from righteous anger, my own and others. And I have a footnote here to check out Lama Rod Owen's new book, Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger, which is just chef's kiss, excellent. I say, I want to punish people too sometimes, especially those whom I have survived. I'm not above it. I don't want to protect those who cause harm or limit the options of survivors. I want healing for all. I want to bring our attention to patterns that echo and generate harm for survivors and harm doers. I want to bring our attention to what generates healing for those survivors who receive and those who cause harm, and the majority who do both. I want to bring our attention to the things we don't yet know how to do. I want to ask us all to commit to abolitionist practice together. I also want to be as brave as those I look up to, those I call teacher. Many of them were willing to speak up when they felt their beloved movements heading in a regressive, divisive, or capitalist direction, offering perspective, risking belonging in order to offer some love. This booklet is full of love notes and hopefully some clear invitations in a new direction. And then I wanted to read my root system is emergent strategy when it comes to all of these things. So I'm always looking at nature and being like, nature, what do you got? Like anything for this? Can you help us? And I believe that our teacher from nature is mushrooms and mycelium. So I just want to read a little bit about what I think they offer us. Mushrooms are a great teacher in this recentering work. One of our oldest ancestors, mycelium and mushrooms, show us that the instance of life we can witness, the mushroom, is always evidence of a much more complex and wider network of connections underground. The same thing is true with conflict and harm. We are all connected to each other at our best and at our worst. The instances of visible dissonance, harm, and abuse in movement are evidence of toxicity in our intersecting systems of identity, belonging, resource, power, and home. One toxic substance is supremacy, so ubiquitous that it has long been invisible to those benefiting from it and can seem desirable to those suffering from it. It manifests as white supremacy, male supremacy, ableist supremacy, straight supremacy, cis supremacy, and more. The belief that some of us are normal, are better, are justified to take and do whatever we want, including harm each other and the earth. We won't end the systemic patterns of harm by isolating and picking off individuals, just as we can't limit the communicative power of mycelium by plucking a single mushroom from the dirt. We need to flood the entire system with life-affirming principles and practices to clear the channels between us of toxicity, of the toxicity of supremacy, to heal from the harms of a legacy of devaluing some lives and needs in order to indulge others. Mycelium looks the same way our brains look, networks of data, communication, and nourishment flowing in every direction. Mycelium can help us learn how to process conflict and harm into life and beauty. Mycelium helps us see ourselves. For the pieces in this booklet, I considered working with the metaphors of mushrooms or swarms of wasps, packs of hyenas, zombified ants, piranha. Initially, I chose to look directly at our own behavior because we too are networked to nature. I looked at metaphors from human history that demonstrate ways that we are unique amongst every other species we know in terms of how we reason and communicate, but stay committed to gleeful vengeance and collective punishment. But in this booklet, I have upgraded those metaphors and include explanation as to why. I'm asking you now in my introduction to keep on your mycelial glasses as you move through the text. Feel for any and all teachers in nature who can help us learn what we do not yet know. So, the other things I just want to say before we start is I'm an abolitionist. And I've done a couple of interviews around this, and people are like, what do you think of J.K. Rowling? What do you think of, the worst case, R. Kelly? What do you think of these people? And I'm like, not great thoughts. But what I am speaking about with this book and with my work and with what I'm inviting us into is a conversation amongst those of us who articulate ourselves as abolitionists. I think that everyone else in the world is causing harm and moving through these cycles, and our work is to be a very compelling force of abolition that makes other people look at it and be like, oh, maybe that's actually possible. Maybe defunding the police and maybe moving into a world without prisons is actually possible, because over there are movements of people who are finding ways to hold each other accountable, create boundaries, break cycles of harm, and get in right relationship with each other, move through generative conflict, and not have to agree on everything, right? We're not creating cult systems here. We're really figuring out how do we actually create movements towards justice and liberation, movements towards abolition. I think it's our responsibility to make it visible to people that something is possible. And it's something that we don't actually know how to do yet. We don't have it scaled up to size. I quote Miriam Kaba almost every day. especially what she says, which is that the current system of punitive justice has had 250 years in this country of practice time, funded practice time. They have gotten every resource they need in order to police and prison us, and it hasn't broken the cycles of harm. If anything, it has made it worse off. And of course, it's rooted in slavery. So when we were abolitionists then, we were trying to end slavery. We're still trying to end that. So that's a key part of this, is if you're showing up and you're like, I'm not an abolitionist, then it might be hard for you to understand the impetus, how important it is to those of us who are abolitionists to figure out how do we practice abolition with each other right now today. So there's a lot of great books on abolition. And I recommend that if you haven't read them, if you haven't landed solidly in an abolitionist framework, you might want to pause here, come back to this after you've done some of that other reading. So that you can be present in the conversation. I think that's fine. If you're like, yeah, I'm an abolitionist and I'm here and I want to be, like, let's go, let's roll. I also want to say, I deeply believe in practice. I believe we become what we practice. So if we are practicing seeing other people as trash, then I believe we practice creating a huge pile of trash in our lives. And I believe if we are practicing, what are the, I'm trying to think of how to even say it, responsibility, right? If we're practicing taking responsibility for each other, then we get to be in a practice of being a community that can hold the responsibility of all having been socialized by capitalism, all having been socialized by these punitive justice systems, all having been socialized by colonialism. So I want us to be in practice with each other of transformative justice at every level, in every relationship. And I'm a movement worker in the post-COINTELPRO era. So I feel very sensitive to the fact that there is surveillance and that there are a lot of people who benefit from us being at odds with each other inside of our movements. And I want us to constantly be careful about that. And I don't think that the way we've been moving has integrity to the fact that we have that history and we know that people are wishing for our downfall right now. So that's going to be present in this conversation and present in anything I work on. And yeah, I want us to become the model. I want us to become the living invitation that people move towards. So here I want to stop talking. It's a lot. I said a lot of things. And I want to invite Shira first to come into the conversation. And Shira, I'd love for you, you've been a huge teacher to me, as you know, on all things of all things. So I feel like you've taught me how to be in my body, both as a fat queer woman and as someone whose abilities are constantly changing and deteriorating. I feel like you have taught me how to be in right relationship with change and with limitation. And I feel like you have really taught me a ton about transformative justice. When I was working on emergent strategy, I reached out to you around transformative justice. Like, I think I'm seeing a connection here. Can you help me clarify it? And your answer was so clear that I was like, I'm not even going to try to edit or paraphrase. I'm just putting this verbatim into the book. It was so good. And that's who and how you move through the world. You are so clear, so loving, so accountable, and so great. And so I wanted, having you involved in this process was so important to me. And I wanted to start off by just asking a little bit about, why did you answer to the call to engage with this piece?
Because you asked me to.
Yes. So I can basically ask and I shall receive, is what you're saying.
I mean,
I'll use this power for good.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things. Like, I mean, you asking me first and foremost, honestly, because we have so many shared values. I mean, I have the word practice tattooed on my knuckles. I like,
yes,
I live it, breathe it, possess it. I just quoted Wu-Tang. So I think that I believe in rigorous practice. I believe in failed practice.
Yes.
I believe in safe practice. I believe in risky practice. And I think we have an opportunity to practice through this piece in a way that I know has pushed me really hard. And so I engaged with it because what you were writing about was about our collective body. It was about our collective process.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like a really important time to dig into our collective body and find the I always say I have like two hearts. I probably have a lot. I have my hurt heart and I have my healed heart. My hurt heart makes excellent decisions.
Yeah.
And quick ones, and ones that my healed heart sometimes struggles to live by. Like I give future Shira a lot of shit to deal with.
Yeah.
And my healed heart is I try to access as much as I can. And I felt like this piece was coming from my healed heart and speaking to my healed heart. And my hurt heart just wanted to keep exploring and thinking about all the edges of that.
Great. Thank you. And Malkia, you have been, since we met, such an incredible teacher and someone who has continuously invited me into spaces where I had to become more accountable in order to be and to stay. You're the person who introduced me to somatics. You brought me in back in the day for the Center for Media Justice Board to really understand what is it we're up to when we're trying to claim that we are creating the narrative of the future, that we are taking claim of the stories. And you are someone who I find to be unflappably brave in public. And when it came to this conversation, I was like, I really want to make sure that I'm being unflappably brave. That's really hard to say, by the way. It's brave to even say it. You were someone who I was like looking at, and I was like, I want to make sure that I'm not backing down from a potential fight or from a potential line being drawn. I felt like you were someone who I trusted to fortify that. You are also someone who continuously opens up spaces where people have to show up with their whole selves, their heart, their grief, their longings, their losses, their love. And so it was just no question to me when it came to this conversation. And so I wanted to ask you the same thing. What for you, what led for you to engage in engaging in being in this piece with me and writing the afterword? And yeah.
Well, I think that my reason is generational.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, my family came to this country from Jamaica, and um, as immigrants, my there was tension between, my grandparents and Black Americans. They saw themselves as distinct from Black
Yes.
Americans, different. And yet somehow my mother became a member of the Black Panther Party and an incredible internationalist because she believed in the linked fate of all Black people all across the world.
Uh-huh.
And so first off, she put it in me, this idea that our futures are linked, and
Yeah.
that our survival depends on one another. But also, she was a member of the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party, I'm gonna have to put this little baby down. She wants to be involved, too involved.
Luna.
I mean, can we
I Luna.
welcome her as part of the panel? I feel
That was
the
Luna,
contribution is.
everybody, that was
That's
Luna, my
Luna.
muse.
One of
But
two
one or
amazing kitty
two,
cats
one
who
or
like to
two.
break computers and take
Yeah,
names.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what they do. That's what they do. But my mom was expelled from the Black Panther Party probably about 22 times, several, multiple dozens of times.
Mm.
And she was expelled for reasons like not sleeping with a certain man, not going abiding by a certain agreed upon politic, variety of reasons. But her experience as a woman in the Black Panther Party, a party that I love, a
Mm-hmm.
party that she loved,
Mm-hmm.
um, her experience was a patriarchal experience. Her experience was a sexist experience.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when my mother would talk about the Panther Party, all you saw was love.
Yeah.
All you saw was love. I grew up with the elder Panther men. Some of them be drunk as hell, laid up on our table, And I'd be like, "Why, mommy?" And she's like, "This is our brother." Like, I don't, what you mean? Why? When you've given as much as they've given to this movement, you can ask about that. Now,
Mm.
there's confusing messages in there, right? There's
Yes.
messages like where your boundaries at, right? What but one of the messages in there was a message around complexity, a message
Mm.
around our group, our collective healing. So some of this is generational, but then also I have my own stories, right? I'm a survivor. Um,
Yeah.
and when I say survivor, I hate the people, everybody don't know what that means. I'm a survivor of specifically childhood sexual assault.
Uh-huh.
And also, um, I am a person who, as a direct result of growing up with a parent who had a fatal disease, sickle cell
Yeah.
anemia, being a survivor of sexual assault, my mother being a survivor of sexual assault.
Uh-huh.
Um, I also created harm, in my world and in my life. I acted out. I was a whirlwind. I didn't know how to manage my feelings. I grew up, you know, um, I was taught boundaries from a survivor, from an unhealed survivor,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And the thing is that I was so lucky. I was so lucky to continuously find people who would hold me accountable but never cast me out. So I'm engaging with the work because I got to learn, over time, through loving exchange and in loving conditions,
Yes.
how to be who I most wanted to be, while also learning what is not acceptable and not okay. You know
Mm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, so I just feel like I'm engaging because I'm giving back. People gave that to me, and I'm honored. I'm so honored by that gift. You know what I'm saying? I'm so honored by that gift.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess that's what I'll say about it. It's like I got this history, I got the political, the politics, and I'll tell you this, my mom always used to tell me, it's not for us to believe in unity, it's for us to believe in solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole unity thing is like more about conforming, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
solidarity thing is more complex,
That's
and it
right.
has to do with learning to be together despite our differences and challenges and our different where we positioned and all the harmful shit we're taught and all the harmful shit we do.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? All the
That's
harmful
right.
shit we do. And I'm gonna just say this: people be like, "I'm an abolitionist," right? But then, and they're like, "Yes, I want to tear down the prisons. Yes, I want to welcome all the people home." But you know what? A lot of them people you welcome home, they did shit. They caused harm. You feel me?
Right.
And we do need a way for them to come back into community. Okay,
Right.
just like we need to be able to acknowledge that there's no people over here that cause harm and some people over here that's innocent.
Yeah.
It's it's a big old mix. It's
Yeah.
a big old mix. So I'm here because I want to explore that complexity, the same complexity that lives in me.
That's great.
It's a complexity that lives in our movement and lives in our communities. And
Yeah.
I believe in being honest. I believe in radical honesty.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it. That's all I have to say about that question.
Thank you. So I wanted for each of us to share a little bit of our journeys towards abolition, towards transformative justice, and specific projects, specific thoughts along the way. And I'll just start by saying, for me, I think the first time I had an awareness that there was something that I was really attending to was after Amadou Diallo got killed. I was similar. Yeah, it was just like we were in New York. I was in college, last year of college, and Amadou Diallo got killed. And um, I had it was also Giuliani's New York. And so they had the stop and frisk. I can't remember, stop and frisk units. Um, and I got stopped by one shortly after Amadou Diallo got killed. And I was with a Latinx woman and a Latinx man and I think an Arab man. And the police stopped us and the other three took off running. And I was a little drunk. I didn't take off running. And I was terrified. And I remember being so terrified. And I was like, oh, the police could kill me right now. Like, that's what they do. And it just was like so clear. And they didn't. It was a undercover unit. They weren't wearing police gear. They didn't show their badges until they were holding me up against a wall. But they had weapons. And I just remember, yeah, just the terror I felt and the connection I made at that point where I was like, you know, Amadou Diallo was in front of his home and I was walking to my home, and it didn't matter at that point that I was an Ivy League college student. What mattered in that moment that I was Black and that these people had complete power over my life. And so that kicked on, right? It kicked on something where I was like, there's something wrong with this. And then in college, I started reading Angela Davis. I started reading all the books and starting to understand that it was tied in to an analysis around capitalism, an analysis around colonialism, a history with slavery. And it just was like, like all the fireworks when stuff starts synapsing in the brain and you start to understand how interconnected oppressions are and how interconnected these systems are. And I went into the harm reduction world. And in the harm reduction world, it was like such a fast and good education in how people get treated the moment we think that they are doing things we do not approve of in society. And I learned so much about relinquishing judgment. And I'm a Virgo. My judgment is like, I'm born with like a high and fully intact judgment meter or whatever. And I had to go through that process of learning, how do I not judge someone who's nodding off in a staff meeting? And how do I not judge myself for the longing that I have to be high right now? How do I not judge myself for the flagrant sex that I'm having? How do I not judge myself for the harm that happened to me when I was a child? How do I not judge myself for the confusing sexual experiences that I'm having that now in the Me Too era, I look back and I was like, dang, it was much worse than I even understood. And I had understood some things, you know. I feel like it took 10 years of somatics for me to really unravel what I had survived already, because there was not language for it when I was going through it. But by the end of the harm reduction period, I was like, I'm an abolitionist. That was when I knew that I could take on the terminology. And it has continued to grow and deepen, grow and deepen. And I'm so grateful for the work of transformative justice. So I knew, you know, I was like, there's something there about going into the root system, and that really resonated with me. And like I said, when I was writing Emergent Strategy, it occurred to me that transformative justice might be the main way that humans can practice resilience, is the idea that no matter what harm we have done or that is done to us, we can recover. We can recover, which is not to say we heal and there's no scar, right? But we can recover with our scars and our wounds and our stories. We can continue. And I started to wonder what it would look like to be part of a society that could continue, that was still life moving towards life instead of life moving towards isolation. We can't survive in isolation, right? Relationship is how we survive. To me, transformative justice is how we get in right relationship with each other. So that's a bit of the journey I've been along. And I want to shout out the Ruckus Society, because while I was at the Ruckus Society, I was there for 5 years, I learned a lot about challenging power very directly. And when are the moments, when are the times when that is the most strategic move? And I think a lot of what we're trying to figure out in our movements right now is, how do we challenge harm directly in horizontal power relationships or near horizontal power relationships? So that's mine. Either of you want to share a little bit, a lot about your journeys with abolition and transformative justice? Hi, Sneaky. Hi, little baby.
I think Sharon wanted to go.
Oh, really?
That's what I had thought that, I had got
That's
that
what you had
vibe.
thought?
Yeah.
Let me see what Shira had thought. Shira, had you thought that?
Are you asking? Because I didn't. You're voluntolding me.
You're like,
I'm just opening the space, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you don't want to go right now, I can go, but I offer it to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. um, I think my journey to abolition was really different than my journey on transformative justice or about transformative justice or to transformative justice. I think that I think a couple things about, like, first of all, like, the community that I was in when I was younger, we couldn't call the police. We weren't being helped by social services except for harm reduction projects. And I was a part of a community that was made up of people in the sex trade, people who were using drugs. I was using drugs. I was in the sex trade. I was sleeping rough. I say the sex trade for specific reasons. Like, it was not work for me at that point. It wasn't coercion, but I didn't identify as a worker in that way. And so, for me as a young person, we had to figure it out. We had to figure out how to have each other's backs. We had to figure out what to do about the asshole. We had to figure out how to do really everything that we think of someone else supposed to be helping us with.
right.
Beth Ritchie the other night on this incredible panel was talking about how we replaced safety with services. We replaced the idea of safety with services. And that became true for me later as an adult. But as a younger person and through my early 20s, I couldn't access safety or services. And so the way that we figured that out was through violence, a lot. And it was also through building deep, hardcore, long-term relationships with people who I'm still close to. And so I think that because I was a survivor, also, like, Mac, when you said being raised and taught by a survivor and being taught those boundaries, I the amount of mistakes, the amount of harm that I experienced and caused trying to figure out in the name of safety, either through my own misunderstandings about what that meant or through very deliberate acts. I think violence teaches us to lie. And for me, my Sharpie was the truth, right? Like, I Sharpied people's names who caused harm everywhere. Like, the bathroom wall was Twitter, And so I think that, like, the boundaries that I relearned in community and through AA and 12-step and through harm reduction, which was, like, I think I mean, it's definitely the only reason I graduated high school was because I had harm reduction programs. And because I was involved in syringe exchange. Like, that was transformative justice, right? Prison abolition came a little later, both because I didn't understand the words and because I didn't understand the system. I understood institutional violence. I was experiencing that. I didn't have a name for it, but I understood the system and what we were experiencing in terms of oppression and harm. I didn't understand how prison was a tool of that until I got one of my it wasn't so I had two jobs in prisons. One was in a women's prison where I was an intern and started seeing myself and in every woman who was there and trans person who was there, and asking myself why I wasn't there. And so much of it had to do with passing and privilege, how I didn't get arrested versus when I was arrested, when I was charged, what I was charged with, how the charges happened. And I started really thinking about the difference between these women who I'm becoming close to and my mom or my aunt or me. What are those differences and why is that so critical? And then the next time I got paid work in prison was on Rikers Island, and I was working with young people who'd been charged as an adult because they committed sexual act or sexual violence or sexual harm. We were mostly charged with rape. And the same thing, the young people who were being charged at 16, 17 as adults versus my dad, who was arrested constantly but never served time. And thinking about those differences, and also thinking about how little those young people knew who were only a few years younger than me about how to have sex safely, because they were all survivors. And so I was having conversations with young people just a few years younger than me about coming out as survivors while they were in prison being charged as adults. And I was like, what is the horror here? And I started to understand prison as a site of sexual violence. And as a survivor, coming to terms with my own experiences of childhood sexual abuse, of intimate violence, of witnessing my mom's violent relationship, and my mom is a survivor of sexual violence and of childhood violence, I had this mind explosion around how can prison as a site of sexual violence be a place where we send survivors who are causing harm and who need so much care, attention, and assistance, especially the young people I was working with. And
Thank you, love. I appreciate that history.
I identify with a lot of that. And my story is a little different, and I'll be brief about it. But I came to abolition, first of all, through my mom. I already explained that. But, when I was 9 years old, I jumped the turnstile from Brooklyn. And I jumped the turnstile because that's what you do, you jump the turnstile. And I think I didn't have my bus pass, or I don't know why, but I jumped the turnstile. And I was arrested. I was detained, I should say. But the way I was detained was that I was handcuffed to the gate, the gate in the train station on the G train on Bedford Nostrand. And I was left there for hours by myself, handcuffed. And I peed on myself. I was crying, I was hysterically crying. And they came back, several hours later and uncuffed me, and let me go. So I realized, even though I didn't have the language, I realized at that moment, see, it has nothing to do with what you did, how you're treated by authority, whether or not you get arrested or you don't. those decisions have nothing to do with whatever you did and everything to do with who you are. So I learned that lesson at that time. But I also learned, later because I came out when I was 12 and a half, and when I was 13, I went to camp. I always went to Girl Scout camp every summer. It's cheap.
Yep.
It's the Girl Scouts. You know what I mean? Get the kills. You know what I'm saying? Moms was like, "Yeah, we out." And I had not told anyone anything, but I started having sex with my camp counselor. You know,
Uh-huh.
and my camp counselor was maybe 22. I went home. My mom found out. It's a whole big deal.
Yeah.
And she was faced with this question. My camp counselor was a black woman. And she
Mm.
was faced with the question, do I consider this a sexual assault? Do I consider this child abuse? Do I contact the police and have this run through the police? Do I shut this camp down? This camp that my child has gone to and that many other children go to. What do I do? Are they just fucking kids at this camp? What's going on?
Yeah.
And it was a very hard set of decisions, a very hard set of choices around whether or not, you know, this should be a police matter.
Yeah.
And she ultimately decided that it should not be, She did everything she could to try to hold this women accountable. But you know what? I kept seeing her. And the woman was
Wow.
violent towards me. It was a bad situation.
Yeah.
But my mom could not figure out what to do. So part of my journey to abolition was
Mhm.
about understanding it's a complex issue.
Yep.
It's not simple, and people want to run away from the complexity of it. They want to break it down, make it cookie cutter, make some good and evil, type stuff going
Yeah.
on. But that doesn't exist. So that was my second kind of big lesson. And my third, and not my final, but I think the final one that I'm going to share here
Yeah.
is that once I came out and once my mom got over her being upset about me being gay and was really focused on, so how do we do this in a way that's going to protect my child? She decided to, join the board of Hedrick Martin Institute. Um, you know, just got involved in every aspect of my life, which was its own challenge. You know what I mean? Don't nobody want to be involved with that.
Mom. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? At every turn. But her thing was I can let you free as long as I'm right here with you, basically, right? So I was at the pier. Here come my mom at the pier. I'm like, Lord have mercy. But the point is that her decision was that we should go on TV, that we should go on a series of talk shows for a year and talk to everybody about what being a gay teenager and being black was all about. Because many of the
Mhm.
people who were going on shows at the time were white.
Mhm.
I was terrified, and I said, this does not feel like a safe space, you know? And my mom said, I'm sorry. Did you think that there was a safe space?
Mm.
And
Mm.
her thing was this expectation of a safe space it's illogical. We live in a violent nation, a punitive nation, a nation built on slavery, white supremacy, like a patriarchal, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
patriarchy is old as dirt. Like there's no safe space, but there can be brave space, and there
Yes.
can be space that we are in where we're in principled space.
Yes.
And so that's what she was teaching me. One that two things. One is that I learned that when you put yourself out there and you
Yes.
you get on TV. I mean, I was 13, 14 years old, right? And I'm telling not only my mom that I'm gay, but I'm telling the whole city of New York. I'm telling the whole country. I was on Sally
Yeah.
Jesse Raphael. Here I am, gay. I'm exposing myself to a lot of
Yes.
harm, a lot of hurt, a lot of potential violence. And I did receive violence in the streets. And most of my most dangerous spaces and my most dangerous opponents sometimes were black men, my
Mhm.
brothers,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? And so there's all this complexity in here all
Yeah.
the stuff around, do you stand up and stand out, or do you hide because it's difficult? What is the difference between safety and discomfort,
Yeah.
like being unsafe or being uncomfortable? Like all of these lessons were part of my journey
Yeah.
toward abolition. You know,
That's right.
I've been arrested probably 17 times, 17, 18 times.
Yeah.
I was in jail for a couple of weeks when I was a young person. You know, like I've never been in prison, you know what I'm saying? But like I visited many of my folks in prison. You know, we do, my sister's very involved in political prisoner abolition.
Yeah.
So my personal experience did translate
Yep.
into a political experience. But I just want to share, like, it
Yes.
wasn't just about like um my abolitionist tendencies weren't about prison alone. They're about, how do we move away from punishment as a way to hold people? How do we
That's right.
rethink accountability? How do we not use accountability as a to blame people? How do we distinguish between being uh wrong? How do we distinguish between being blameless and being innocent?
That's
Like,
right.
you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like you're rather, you can not be blameless but still be innocent. You
Yes.
feel me? And that's the space that I'm in, that I was in all my life. I kind of like grew up in it, and I'm in it. I'm still in it.
Yeah.
I think of it as a process and a journey. I'm not a destination. So that's my
So
journey.
I really appreciate that from both of you. And it felt important to me that we each share some of those journeys because um, I think part of what's been happening right now is that the word abolition and sort of the idea of being an abolitionist is spreading, right? It's moving into the mainstream, and which is good news, right? Like movements have worked for a long time to share these ideas, to spread these ideas. But I think that they're spreading without people actually having to sit with a personal journey around what does it actually mean to be an abolitionist? What is the impact of police? What is the impact of prisons in a personal way, right? Not just like this is now the trend. The trend is to push back against this. The trend is to be like, oh, I'm blacking out my social media square. This is awful. Like, what does it actually look like to take on abolition? And it feels important to me because the book, the idea of this tying cancel culture to the journey of abolitionism is not a given, right? In some ways, there's aspects of cancel culture that are very much like, hey, this doesn't have to involve the state, and it's a way to hold someone accountable. There's that, and so trying to pull it together, I think it's an important conversation to be like, what do we think as abolitionists, as people who have been committed to this for a long time, and without saying that there's a right or a wrong way about it, right? Like that has been so important for me, is that I'm like, rather than presuming like this is the way or this is the way, I'm really wanting to lean into what are we actually practicing? How does it feel to be in that practice? And a question I keep asking is, are we satisfied? How does it feel to be a satisfied abolitionist? When would we be satisfied? What would that look like? So coming into the cancel culture conversation now, I would love to hear from both of you and jump in myself a little bit with this, is what are some of the challenges and complexities of cancel culture and call out culture as it's playing out today in our movement spaces?
I'm like, wait, you want to answer? I mean, for me, some of the complexities are, and some of the challenges are this. Women, um, cis women, trans women, femmes, young women, all different kind of female body people, and people of a female gender, are uh, disproportionately harmed under patriarchy, and the disproportionate, the lack of power, that this set of folks experiences in relationship to extraordinary violence. I think it is, you know there's a question in there. Well, what else can I do if I don't want to go down the carceral road?
Yes.
And I do want to hold somebody accountable that I am experiencing as a perpetrator, as a violator, someone who has committed what I consider to be an assault, or what is just on fact an assault. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
what do I do? So there's that set of questions, right?
Yeah.
And for that person, they might think, yo, you know, making you lose your job is really not on par with me sending you to prison. Okay,
Yep.
right? Or me humiliating you in public as you humiliated me in private is really not. Those things are not on par with each other.
Yeah.
Now the challenge with that, there's no. I mean, first of all, it's like yes, right? Who hasn't felt that way?
Yeah.
How many times have I wanted to? I mean, look, I told you about my camp counselor. Look, did I not?
Right.
I walked into a community space years later, 20 years later, actually more than that. And I spoke my truth. She was in the group and I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. And I said, "You the one that raped me," right? It took mad, like my voice was shaking. I understand the feeling and the need to name the truth, to speak the truth out loud and be witnessed in it, right? I
Yes.
get that.
Yes.
The challenge is all of our different perceptions of harm, they're not all the same,
That's right.
and what happens when the harm is like, um, you raped me versus you fired me, or we have a toxic relationship versus you physically abused me or whatever, right?
Yes. Yep.
Like, and the thing is, who am I to say? It's not for me to say what's true for you, but it
Right.
is for me to say there is nuance that is missing from this conversation.
Yeah.
Right? That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Is that there's complexity missing, there's nuance missing, and as a people trying to get free, don't we deserve that nuance? Don't we deserve that level of complexity?
Yeah.
Why would we shy away from what's messy and necessary
Yep.
in order to make it neat and punitive? That don't make no sense to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's
I
that's
do.
really where I'm at with it. Is like, it's not like I have answers. It's more that I'm not afraid of the questions. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
And I'm not afraid of what that makes me look like. If people want to say, "Oh, because you're raising these questions and trying to insert this complexity, that means you don't care about survivors." Well, guess what? I am a survivor. I care about survivors, and I believe in this in using the internet and other social media platforms to um, build power. That's
Yeah.
my work, right? That's what I think about.
Yeah.
My question is what you're doing building power? So that's the question, not an
That's
answer.
great.
I'm not
Yep.
telling you it's not. I'm saying, can we not ask the question?
That's right.
And is there no room for a space between action reaction? That's not always the issue. Sometimes people have waited 15 years to say something, right? So I'm speaking to you if that is your issue, that you did not wait. You feel me? So these are some of the things um that I think are complexities. I also think it's a deep complexity when um you spoke about lateral relations of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. A lot of times people don't perceive those as lateral relationships of power.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, but you have positional power because you're on television." And it's like,
Right.
so I'm a woman of color and you're a woman of color, and somehow you think because I'm on TV that changes my power relationship, my relationship to state, to political, economic, or some other
Right.
kind of power, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
think we
Right.
need to work on our power analysis too,
That's right.
on
Yeah.
our understanding of power. What are we talking about? Presence, as my brother Rashad Robinson always says, presence is not power. Simply being visible and seen does not mean I'm not equally as likely to be harmed, arrested, beaten the shit out of, or whatever the other case may be.
That's
So,
right.
so we just need greater nuance. And I'm gonna say
Yeah.
the last thing I'm gonna say, because I'm not be going on. Let me just wrap.
You're doing great.
But also this thing around needing. I mean, I want to appreciate the women who, and I think there's complexity issues there too. But I really want to appreciate. I read this Medium article recently about a situation. Right, she wrote about a situation with I
Mm-hmm.
think that a prosecutor who may in fact be black. I think I don't know. I don't know the races of the people involved. Right, but I think
Okay.
there's some complexity there. But about a long-standing um, situation of harm where this man, I think it's a black man, but this man who has been sexually violating women, according to this article. But not just
Mm-hmm.
according to this article, according to many something that many people have said. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now the thing I appreciate about what she did is when you read the article, all throughout it, she's asking these questions. All
Yeah.
throughout the article, she's naming her own agency in it. She's
Yeah.
not like, oh, it's all about this other person. She's like, I'm a person too. I'm in it.
Yes.
I made choices too, you know, and she holds that in there without giving up 1 ounce of what she's trying to, that she's trying to hold, the accountability she's trying to name. So I'm just
That's
trying to
great.
say, like, can we be in a space of acknowledging this nuance, acknowledging our
Yeah.
agency, while still being able to demand integrity, demand boundaries,
Yeah.
demand respect. I
Yep.
don't think those things are mutually exclusive, and I think my life proves that.
That's
I
great.
can speak about where I've done harm, where
Yep.
I've been wrong,
Yeah.
you know.
That's right.
But I also recognize that as a black butch, as a black masculine presenting, you know, um, queer person, that there are things ascribed to me around harm and perpetration that have nothing to do with what I did and everything to do with who I am. And
Yes.
I'm just saying that that's wrong, and that we as a movement, we need to explore the ways that we build in our own hierarchy, the way we replicate the punitive system under which we have been raised.
Right.
If you can't say that, if you can't acknowledge that that is happening, that we living in different worlds. That's what I don't.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
that's about self-reflection. That's about being honest.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna leave it there.
I really appreciate that. And I mean, I I think nuance and discernment might have been the primary motivations for writing this, because both I was looking for discernment on the front end of, like, I want us to be able to discern when it is at the level that needs a public intervention, that needs a call out, that needs a call for a cancellation, and when it's something else. And um, in the wake of putting it out, I feel like even more became clear to me, that I was like, oh, like, there's also there's no nuance in terms of what people mean by harm. Also, everything has gotten collapsed, so it can be, when I was writing the book, I pulled apart, there's misunderstandings, right, that are happening, where it's like literally someone said something was misunderstood, or some energy was misunderstood. And rather than clarifying what happened, we go to call out level. There's contradictions, where we're really actually just holding two very different ideas inside of a similar space, inside of a similar organization or movement, and we can't figure out how to resolve those. And we start to name it as a conflict. It's like, it's actually just you holding two different beliefs, which may or may not be at odds, which may also, I think of a lot of what's happening with the election is a contradiction, is that we are anti-capitalist. Many of us are post-nationalist, anti-racist, and this is who we could vote for. And it's a contradiction, right? And it's like, well, how do we be in that without being like, I'm canceling you, you're a neoliberal, you're this, you don't care about people, right? It's like, no, we just need to broaden and hold. There's just a contradiction. There's actual conflict, which I think is one of the biggest pieces, is we don't know how to fight fair. No one teaches us how to fight with our integrity, with our dignity intact, how to fight in a brave way, brave space way. And I know Mickey is in the call in the audience today, who is the person who introduced me to the concept of brave space. So I'm really grateful that you're here. But to me, that's one of the biggest pieces of it. And in the next book that's coming out, Holding Change, the way of emergent strategy, facilitation, and mediation, there's a section on brave space. There's also a section on kitchen table mediation, and there's a section on principled struggle. And I'm thinking a lot about what does it mean to teach us, to get us interested in principled struggle and get us interested in fighting well, because I'm like, we should not be using call outs as a stand-in for actually just battling it out, like having the fight we need to have and really having a principled struggle about something. So there's all of those levels. And then there's when harm is actually happening, and are we actually talking about abuse? And what are our understandings of abuse? And what I've been learning for years, because what's happened off screen of my life is that I have spent the last several years in abuse extraction scenarios where I have been supporting multiple people in my life who I love deeply to get out of abuse conditions and abuse scenarios. And one of the things I've learned in that is I'm like, oh, people have like every kind of definition of what abuse is and abuse means and how we respond to abuse. There's not a monolithic way. There's not something clear that's like, it's this way. Some people believe it can still be mutual. Others like it can never be mutual. Some people are like, well, that's a toxic. No, that's, what's the difference between a toxic relationship and an abusive relationship? There's all these pieces that I'm like, there's some specialists somewhere who know about this, but a lot of people are experiencing this shit who don't know and don't have the clear language. And across all of that, people are saying, this is a call out. This is a call out. This is a reason for a call out. And it's getting so muddled and it's leading to hyper isolation. And that's at the individual level. There's a question in here. We're going to get to the Q&A right after this, but there's a question here from Amita about what about organizational? What about when the harm is at the level of like an organization is continuously supporting fucked up behavior, supporting attacks, supporting people who we know have caused harm? And I'm like, yes, what are the processes by which we hold accountable those people who have gained power or those organizations who have gained power? And part of the other challenge, and then I'll come to you, Shira, for some on this. For me, the other challenge is I don't see call outs working in the way that we would hope that they would work. So I think that when we do the call out, I want this person to not be in sight. I don't want them to have access to the power they've had access to. And for me, whenever I've participated in one, I'm like, I really want them to take this as a sign to go do some deep self-reflection and get some therapy and like get it together and break the cycle of harm and change. And I've almost never seen that be what actually happens. What I've seen many more times is people disappear, move to a different location where they're not known, and then continue the painful and harmful cycles. And so I'm really interested in what are the technologies we use to create the actual accountability we need that will actually satisfy us and that will actually lead to breaking those cycles of harm. So all of that feels wrapped up in this. And I would say that a lot of what the book I think is trying to do is detangle something enough so that we can even see what are we looking at. My hope is that people read the book and then start doing some of their own detangling, right? Even if it's like, I disagree with what Adrienne wrote here, but here's my detangling of it, right? I'm hoping that it moves away from, I'm like, this is complex. Let's detangle this and look at all the complexity rather than just sit with the knot and be like, we're going to throw the whole knot away. Shira, anything to add?
I could listen to both of you talk all day. And so I'm on like so many journeys right now. I'm thinking about, I'm also thinking about Amitha's question around organizational accountability. I think for me, the part I have a lot of complicated feelings about, as you know, call out culture. We have lots of discussions about it because call out culture, no. Cancel culture, no. But as a strategy, I have seen it be effective. And in the same way that I've seen violence be effective, and neither of them are the things that I want to teach or advocate.
Yep.
but you know, the reality is that because it can be effective, it shouldn't be widely used.
Yes.
Kind of how I've had a long time struggle with opiate addiction, and I also am a chronic pain survivor, or chronic pain liver. I live every day with lots of chronic pain, and so I sparingly use opiates because I know the power of them.
Yes.
And I feel like there's absolutely survivors who I want to support in call out, because we are systematically and intentionally silenced. And
Yes.
so I feel like that's the confusing nature of it, is because we do experience we do sometimes have gratification
Yeah.
and satisfaction and transformation
Yeah.
from it, but because it's so specific when it works,
Yes.
it's just not a strategy we can use. The other place I feel confused by, and I don't know, I'm sure the internet can help me with this, but my memory of the current moment of cancel culture came from Suey Park starting Cancel Colbert. And Suey was a woman of color, feminist activist, abolitionist, and Colbert was doing tons of racist crap. And Cancel Colbert got like such enormous hashtag activist value. It didn't work, but it got so much attention. And I think what I get really, someone I would love, you know, the spin around on, is because sometimes the use of the term cancel culture feels like it's blaming survivors for speaking out.
Exactly.
And so it's like I don't even want to use the language
Yeah.
of cancel culture, because I want to save the power of cancellation
For when it's actually needed.
for when we need it, because and I think, like, I wonder what it would look like to do power analysis and assessment for will this strategy work here, and who do we need, and thinking of it, a jurisdiction Dixon, I'm sorry, is a dear friend once, you know, said to me, like, I love that we have learned to become such skilled organizers, but what I don't want to see is treating each other as targets.
Exactly.
And so what I think of is call outs as an organizing strategy. And I want to actually elevate it to organizing strategy, so that as organizers, we know when we're using what strategy and why, and know how and what we need to cultivate for that strategy to be effective. And for the rest of those times, I want to see us in transformation. I want to see us in solidarity. I want to see us in holding. I want to see us in messiness.
Yeah.
I love our beautiful mess. Like
I do too.
I like, as I've been paying attention to this panel, I realized, like, you called two of your people who hold mess. Like you know, I like, it's like,
exactly.
It's the truth. Mess is the truth.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
because I spent so much time not in the truth, either because I was dissociative, or because I was surviving, or because I needed to lie to save my life. Mess is a gift. Accountability is a gift. And it gets us closer to the truth.
Yeah.
So.
I appreciate that. And, you know, I also really appreciate that, because part of what was happening for me when I was seeing all these different call outs is I was like, there's one or two of these where this is actually the move that needs to happen. Like, they have attempted every other thing. You know, they have sat down with community. They try to have accountability process. This person is actually causing harm, and we're not going to be able to hear it because it's like a fire hose of calls for all kinds of things to use the same strategy. And I felt, I was just sort of like, oh, and it makes me think, I'm like, do we not know that there's other strategies and what actually works? So we only have a little bit of time left. So I wanted to come and be with the Meet This question. And for those who can't see it, I'm just going to say can you all speak to the difference or lack thereof between an individual survivor of harm wanting accountability from an individual who assaulted them versus an organization that has protected people who have sexually assaulted others while gaslighting and otherwise dismissing and degrading the individual survivors? Specifically thinking of social justice and movement orgs that may have done this, and whether there's a power differential between an individual and an organization as opposed to two people who are in movement together. And I really appreciate the question. And, one of the things that I sit with often is that movements are made up of people. And a lot of times when I'm holding organizations where something has come up that like someone in this organization has actually caused harm, someone in this organization is abusive, that is a formative moment for the organization. And what I have seen is that organizations that actually turn and face that and say, we are gonna hold this person accountable. Here's what that's actually gonna look like. They may lose their job, they may lose some positional power, or there might be some other process that they engage in. Organizations that turn and face it survive. And organizations that don't, that try to push it under the rug or cover it up or just perpetually cover that person, end up not surviving. And it's one of the hardest things I've seen, because when I've seen people try to call organizations out from outside, it goes in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes the organization armors up and protects their person. Sometimes they go into an internal process that lasts forever until they cease to exist. Rarely have I seen it be, okay, we're going to remove that person, or we're going to respond in a way that is useful. I also think it's really interesting because I'm not sure that I believe that it makes sense to hold organizations accountable for individual behavior. And I sit with that, especially I've worked with four organizations now, where the organization was asked to be accountable for something that people did before they joined the organization, before the organization even existed. And so I think we have to be really careful there of how do we actually develop. And this is why before we go, I really want to uplift some of the resources that are named in the book and that I think exist for this. One, Shira and Miriam put out a workbook called Fumbling Towards Repair. And it is really useful for people who are like, we do need to do an accountability process. We need a community accountability process. And it really walks you through what are the steps of doing that. That works with individuals, it works with organizations. It's like, here's the steps. Ajiris Dixon, who Shira just mentioned, did a book called Beyond Survival with Leah Lakshmi Pyapsna Samarasinha that is a history of transformative justice. And it shows what it looks like to practice it, where it's like, we're naming it and we're doing it. And also that a lot of other people are doing experiments and trying to figure this out without necessarily putting that language on it. There's also a resource coming, which is, I solicited from the internet. I was like, who can do mediation? And a ton of people answered and were like, me, I can do mediation. And I'm working with Beam right now to identify out of that list the people who are specifically Black and can support Black conflict and Black issues of harm and can mediate those. And then Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute is going to make the rest available to people. But it feels like we're entering into a window right now where more resources are becoming available than we've ever had before around this. And I think it's because we're moving from the stage of crawling to the stage of like starting to teeter-totter and walk around, right? I still think we're back there though. Like, we're not running, we're not climbing stairs, we are not constructing new buildings. Like, I think we're still so early in it. And I think we get really upset with each other for not being further along. And for me, one of my dreams is that we take this moment to accept that we are where we are and generate more curiosity. How do we learn to be with the messy complexity of actually being humans with each other? I really, really, really appreciate that all the people who came out tonight came. And I wanted to give a chance for if there's anything else that either of you want to say before we close out. I can't believe the time flew by so fast. There's so much in this. And this is just the beginning of these conversations. I'm going to do another conversation with Cindy Weisner and Charlene Carruthers, both of whom were also endorsers of the book, and there might be more. But anything else y'all want to add?
I just wanted to add briefly, I think it's really important that we acknowledge and recognize the term cancel culture is a right-wing invention. You
Yes.
know, it emerged from the right-wing hate speech movement. You know, it
Yes.
was born in academia. It's a product of their attempt to suppress, you know
Yes.
what I'm saying, progressive and liberatory speech, and to stop people from holding hate speech accountable, right? That's where the
Exactly.
term
Political correct, right? Like,
exactly
Exactly.
political is part of that whole
Exactly.
movement, political correctness. Now, I think it's important to note that
Exactly.
because that's not what we're that's and they have then put that on the left, and
Yes.
they have put that language, and they're winning that debate in
Yes.
that way, right? But what we're trying to do actually is deepen our understanding of abolition.
Yes.
We're not um, this is not about call out culture and cancel culture. This is about, do we replicate the punitive nature of a carceral system?
Yes.
Do we do something different? That's the question
That's
that
right.
is being posed through the book. And that's
That's
the
right.
question that we're trying to answer in our work.
That's right. Thank
thank
you, love.
you for that, because that's you just said way better what I was trying to get at with going back to SUI.
Yes.
And it's so critical that we remember that we are in service to not only our ancestors who survived, but to the future that we're building together, and this collective body which needs to get free and can't be imprisoned, and that we are all survivors in this, so that we can begin to heal together through the complexity of this, through figuring out what being deeper, better, clearer about abolition means.
Yes. I love that. And I'll just say, like, little closing thing from the book. Now that I have thought these unthinkable thoughts, which was like the premise of this, right? Is it becomes clear to me that it's all rooted in a singular longing. I want us to want to live in this world, in this time together. I want us to love this planet and this species at this time. I want us to see ourselves as larger than just individuals randomly pinging around in a world that will never care for us. I want to see us as I want us to see ourselves as a murmuration of creatures who are, as far as we know right now, unique in all the universe. Each cell, each individual body itself a unique part of this unique complexity. And to me, that is the essence of abolition, is that we are all capable of reclaiming the miraculous aspect of our lives, and that no matter how much harm has been done to us, we can recover. And I don't want us to always go to what is the worst case scenario, right? Which is such a tiny, 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 tiny percentage of who and what we are. I want us to think about the majority of us who have been harmed, who cause harm, and who don't deserve police and who don't deserve policing in prisons. And how do we do that with each other? How do we stop policing each other, stop imprisoning each other, and start loving each other and liberating each other?
Rachel Kydor said a few weeks ago on this panel, and I've just been thinking about it and thinking about it. If abolition comes and we still have sexual violence, then we are still abolitionists, and it's not over.
Yes.
And I just
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. We know that what we have in place currently doesn't work. We have to create what will work. It's our job. So I hope that this book serves. I hope that you're able to use it to be in conversation with others. I welcome all the pieces, all the thoughts, all the responses, all the iterations. Let's keep learning together. Thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you, Source and AK, for supporting this book coming into the world and supporting us, lifting it and sharing it out. And let's stay in these conversations with each other.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful panelists answering all the questions that came through, and for everyone here on Zoom and also on YouTube. You can find the books on sourcebooksellers.online.com, or you can give us a ring on the phone. Either way, we'll get you a book. And if you have a book from this event, it's on the way.
Yay.
So thank you so much. Adrienne, thank you.
Yay. Thank
To all the
you.
panelists. And we're so excited about the release of Undrowned as well.
Yes.
And so that book is also a part of our book ticket for this event too.
So great.
You could,
I love it. All right.
One. Thank you.
Thank you. Love y'all.